This episode is brought to you by Philly Gemstones.
I did try a necklace once, but it was so minimal that it wasn't really jewellery, so it didn't really compliment the person.
But it's jewellery if you say it's jewellery.
Yeah, I don't think if it's minimal, it's not jewellery. I think
What I meant is it didn't work, so I didn't feel it.
Who said it didn't work? Did you show it to me? Welcome to If Jewels Could Talk. I'm Carol Woolton, the voice of Jewellery, an author, broadcaster, and the woman who initiated the role of jewellery editor at magazines like Tatler and British Vogue. This is a podcast for everyone, for people who do like jewellery, for people who don't realise they like jewellery, and anyone intrigued by fascinating facts, new ideas, and forgotten histories. So please join me as I tell sparkly tales, meeting all sorts of people, delving into 4 centuries of jewellery culture, and investigate what's happening now. There's a strong synergy between architecture, fashion and jewellery. Many fashion designers studied architecture before switching to fashion. Tom Ford, Thierry Mugler, Virgil Abloh, Pierre Cardin, Raf Simons. And it's a similar story in jewellery. That architects have often extended their designs from buildings to humans. Both disciplines are concerned with space, light, geometry, texture, structure, volume and material, all of which has historically tempted many architects to experiment in the jewellery sphere. The visionary architect Zaha Hadid designed twisted cuffs for George Jensen. The Pritzker Architecture Prize winner Frank Gehry for Tiffany was another. Is it just a question of proportion? Are jewels really small-scale building models? I can tell you, I actually tidied up my office because I've invited a couple of designers along this morning. So I'm very thrilled and delighted to have John Pawson, the British architect who's widely considered the father of minimalist architecture here. His architectural projects around the world include flagship stores for designers such as Jill Sander, Calvin Klein, hotels, ballet sets, yacht interiors, a monastery in Bohemia, wooden chapel in Germany, Bastian Gallery in Berlin and London's Design Museum. I could go on, but we might be here all day. Plus, he's a photographer with 500,000 followers who look at his work each day. John, thank you very much for coming and joining me.
Thank you. Beautiful morning.
It's a beautiful morning. And we are joined by Lebanese architect and designer Dina Kamal, who studied and worked in Washington, moved to Beirut, and is now based in London, where her design practice includes precious objects, including jewellery works. And she sort of edits her ideas in strong architectural forms to harness their power, punctuated by precious stones. Thank you for joining us this morning, Dina.
Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, I wanted to unpack that word minimalism.
Oh dear.
And what it means. And I think you have a problem with that word, don't you, John?
I think quite a few architects have a problem with it because it means so many things to so many different people. I found it easier just to go along with the description, because if you start arguing, you get into all sorts of trouble. But I guess if it means clarity and clear vision, and to be able to appreciate space because it's unadorned, then I'll go with minimal.
But what do you think it means?
I think it means all those things. It's covers so many different areas and so many different things. It became known because of the art movement in the 60s. And of course, there isn't one artist from that period who agrees with the term either.
So have we just got lazy? Is it a term that we encompass sort of rigorous simplicity, and then we just sort of use it like that? I
think it's very attractive to people. It seems to have caught on. It's one of those words that is so much used and probably so much misunderstood, I think. Judd called his work essential.
Essential as opposed to putting in anything unessential.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the bare bones.
Yeah, and at the point, an object has when you can't add or subtract anything without changing it for the worse.
And how do you decide that?
How
do you decide what you don't add?
I don't know, maybe that sorts the men from the boys. I don't know.
So it's just a case of your eye and how you see it, your vision.
Yes, I think it's much misunderstood because it's not a hair shirt mentality. It's not about living with nothing. It's just not living with things you don't need.
Like curtains, for instance.
Well, Catherine, my wife, would argue that curtains are essential.
I find that it's not just the object, like it's not curtains, but it's a sensibility, like when something is in balance. And,
exactly.
And it's just, it has a peaceful feeling, but still very intense. And it takes so much time to get to that point, and it's so much more complex. But people, I think, misuse the word because for them it's about removing the curtains or the extra furniture, and that's what minimalism maybe.
Yeah, it's not enough just to paint it white.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's something determined from the beginning.
Yes. I mean, it isn't for everybody. I mean, obviously most humans are, both collectors and they obviously are, people that move around. So there's sort of two things, one that have stuff and ones that don't, but in the same person as well.
So what do you do with your stuff?
I don't have any stuff.
You have nothing?
I have very little.
You have books?
Too many books, yeah. And when I had my studio office at the beginning, I didn't have any books at all because I hate that idea of looking at a book for inspiration, and it's not what you do. True
inspiration, I totally agree, doesn't come from looking at. It's when you get fascinated by something insignificant almost, and exactly. It just creates something in your mind, and you recreate that feeling.
And you don't know where it's coming from. I mean, where it is going to come from.
Yeah, very true.
You can't just sit there waiting and leafing through.
But Dina, I remember when we first met, when you came into Vogue, and I was struck by the simplicity of your pinky rings.
Yeah.
Because I think you were the first person really who did this sort of taking the essence of something like a signet ring and just deleting everything. I mean, it wasn't a signet ring that you'd ever seen before.
Yeah, I think, that's how I came into jewellery. I was actually studying identity and context. My inspiration is more reading or understanding things that inspire us, move us, shift us, create something. I started for some reason looking at the history of wearing, what it meant, the signet ring, from even the Assyrians to pharaohs, I found out, started before the nobleman. But it's about this power that shifts something in us, and with this little object that I was curious about, and it just kind of led from there. But what I felt was I wanted something in it of that belonging. When you wear this little piece that can shift something in you, how do you strip that, take that idea of, it's about being nobility or royalty, but just strip it and use it as a tool that becomes, which is really the essence of all these notions, even in tribal jewelry. And I did this small series, which is the idea of the signet ring is to show what you're linked for, what you're linked to. And I wanted to look at design in a way that is closer to men's jewelry, which is simpler, but at the same time look at reproportionate, so it works for both, based on the body, which is the context. So this finger versus this finger.
John, your aesthetic famously was influenced by a trip to Japan in your mid-20s, where you lived in Tokyo and you studied, or did you study with the Japanese architect Shiro Kuramata? Or were you just influenced by him?
When I got to Tokyo, when I was 24, and I'd seen Domus magazine when I was living up in the north. So I'd seen his work in Domus in the 60s. And so when I got to Tokyo, I thought, being a bit naive, I just rang him up and said, I'm here. This sort of 24-year-old who could have been a schoolboy.
That's amazing.
And so I don't know, he didn't know who I was, so he thought he'd better play safe. And so we had this coffee. And then after that, I had several meetings where I sort of hung around in his office and made a nuisance of myself. And then about 3 or 4 years later, he said, well, I think it's about time you went to school yourself. So by the time I was 30, I went to the Architectural Association.
But you just knew what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and I'd so much sort of built up that I wanted to express.
What did you want to express?
I suppose something that I've felt, that the Kurumata had been able to do, and he was the first person for me since Mies van der Rohe to actually express it physically. And it was this dealing with space. And I don't think anyone else was doing it like he was. And when I started, everybody thought I was mad. My sister sent me a blank white piece of paper saying, "Welcome to the Minimalist Club."
Because at that time, everyone was sort of in maximalist mode, and
Yes.
Interiors had to be cosy and warm and English.
Certainly in England, yes. The Dutch were a bit more sensitive to visual things. We're a culture of literature, aren't we, really? And visual arts aren't big, or weren't big. Now, of course, it's fantastic.
But I read that you were struck by concepts such as wabi. Is it wabi? Which is voluntary poverty, where humble materials are used with sort of honesty and simplicity.
Well, that is, among other things, the Japanese from the 17th century or 16th century, which is, again, wabi or sabi. It's something that not everyone necessarily gets or understands. But it's now, of course, people have written books about it and it's bandied around again.
So left to your own devices, would you have nothing in your space?
Oh, not at all. No. No. You just not have what you need, but only what's essential. But the essential could be, a piece of art or a beautiful chair, and depending where you put it and so on. But you can negate space with more stuff than you need. But, you have to, life's about living, and there are more things than keeping a room uncluttered.
So, Dina, you studied and practiced in Washington. And so what led you into jewellery design?
I think I didn't intentionally do it. It's just I'm always curious to try and understand. It's the same thing that led me to architecture, is when I feel something intensely, when I'm in a space or a narrow, between two walls, how they impact you, proportion, these ideas. And then I start kind of digging and trying to understand that and why we feel this way. And I was just, because I was looking at issues of an identity, I guess at the time, I just it happened that I went into the signaturing, but it's the same concepts. So for me, it's not different, the beginning of it. It's a detail also, because if you think of architecture, you have to think on a big scale and then you have to zoom into the detail, because it's a balance between all those. So
I do find, though, I don't know, it might be just a personal thing, but jewellery is the one area that I did try a necklace once, but it was so minimal that it wasn't really jewellery, so it didn't really compliment the person.
But it's jewellery if you say it's jewellery.
Yeah, I don't think if it's minimal, it's not jewellery. I think
what I meant is it didn't work, so I didn't feel it.
Who said it didn't work? Did you show it to me?
Didn't work on her or him.
Were you commissioned?
I think it was discussed. It wasn't necessarily direct commission. It was just.
And you kind of went through.
I thought, I'll try this, as I've been asked. It's a bit like clothes. I did a raincoat for Burberry, which is
I love that.
Forgotten in the archives. But I just feel quite strongly that, I don't know, I've done small objects.
You've just done a chair, a Tacta chair.
I've done a chair, which is, of course, the absolute ultimate test. I thought I couldn't do it. So I'm really pleased.
I read somewhere that you said it's all architecture. Designing anything is architecture.
I think I meant right down to the coffee cup or the glass, and when you put something on people.
But it's the same. It's the process and the context changes, I think.
Yes, no, I'd love to get to that stage. I'd love to be able to do jewellery.
God,
I really don't think
I'm sure you're already way beyond that stage. It's just maybe...
Because you start with an idea and a drawing, it's the same, isn't it? Is it not just a question of proportion? Is it something different then? It's not just taking a model and downscaling it.
I don't think it's just... proportion is very important, but it's not. Maybe also because I find when I went into jewelers, I still don't consider myself a jeweler. But
what do you consider yourself then? What do you call yourself?
An architect that designs jewellery. And I find that the process and thinking is very different. You know, jewelers really focus either on the stone, the diamond, or on representing something they've seen, like nature, a leaf or a flower. And then architects in general who design jewelry don't think that it's worn on the body, so they make these geometric, very big geometric that are not like. However, if you look at tribal jewelry, they wear massive pieces, yet it feels like as if it's their arm, it's part of their body, like an extension of the body. So, and I think it's very similar to architecture. It's just, it's usually approached as an accessory. And then in that sense, I think it kind of, it loses, it becomes more about the proportion only, which is very important, of course. But I think it's very similar. Like you said, that you designed a raincoat, so you can design a hat.
I mean, I don't know what it says about me, but I never notice anyone's jewellery. And, and they can have, huge diamonds weighing the ears down. And it's like the clothes. I couldn't tell you what some would have been wearing. Whereas Catherine, would say, wasn't that a beautiful dress? Or did you see her?
You don't see it?
I don't see. I just see the person and the face.
And I love that.
So that's superfluous. And you remove it from your sightline because it's superfluous.
Yeah, I think. I haven't thought about it. Voiced it until today, but I don't.
But then, when you go into a beautiful space, it's not that you're just conscious of the space and the feeling.
Yes, exactly. Yes. An atmosphere.
And it should be the same, So maybe you are not conscious of the piece, but something struck you or stayed, and that's even better because the less conscious, I think, and your work says that to me. So it's more about what I feel than it's looking at saying, oh, this is good design.
So it's going for an emotional response.
I always go that way, or it has to be intellectual or emotional or something, or physical sometimes.
So I'm interested in what you both think about light, because the minute John arrived, he commented on the light this morning. And I think, as you said, your space that you create seems to be about light and how it hits and where it comes from. And I think, Dina, in your jewellery, it's often translucent stones like windows pulling you into the piece. So I wonder what you both think of the importance of light in architecture and jewellery.
Well, there's no architecture without natural light. I mean, that's what Louis Kahn said, among others, I'm sure. And it's the most important ingredient. I mean, it's, after all the other things like material or scale or proportion.
Yeah, there's nothing, I think, without light. Even in darkness, pitch black darkness, and then light somehow appears and you start seeing a silhouette, and it's so stunning sometimes and beautiful, and it makes you see things differently. So when we finish a piece and the way we photograph, for me, is sometimes I want it in shadow or in light, or, because it speaks, it shows another layer that maybe I see in the piece. And people, if you do the traditional jewelry photography, you can never understand or feel that about the light. And I think it's incredible to see that. But that's how also an idea starts, because the same thing you see every day, the light hits it differently, and then what your vision changes based on that. But your chapel, for example, the light in that is everything. I mean, other than that, it's very raw, the wood, but then how when you're inside, it's a different feeling. I've never been, but from what I've seen, I've been to the Berlin Museum, which is, the light there is phenomenal. And the water, when you look, is pitch black, but it's reflective. And then the pieces, how they're lit, all of that with the space, it's intense.
Yeah, this is a bunker in World War II bunker in Berlin, where it's a permanent collection of Désiré Fouel's, and he insists that before you tour the museum and see his pieces, which are very low lit, you start in a completely dark room for 2 minutes, which unnerves some people.
And do you choose gemstones for the light particularly, and do you have specific cuts to maximise that light?
I think I choose in different ways. Sometimes we did this transparent series and I just wanted like glass, ideally, and I wanted to just see through, because people always have the diamond and, you know, it's about how you put that. And I wanted you to have the glass in place of the diamond and just look through into the bridge that's holding it, or the structure that we build, or all of that. But I think it's also when I look at diamonds, because people love diamonds, for me it's like when you look at pearl or gold, or it's, you want to connect with it somehow and then respond to that. And sometimes it's about the transparency or the cut. I think a lot of the times for me is because the diamond is so expensive and it's supposed to be so glorious, I want to make it humble and very, you know, still. And I think this is the future of luxury, is how
humble diamond.
It humble, not just diamond, humble everything, but that's so refined and so well, you know, that's the Japanese. They take something like they took tea from China and then they transformed it into this phenomenal experience that it's the best tea, the best room, but it's so simple. How do you do that with the transparency? I think in diamonds, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's looking at the project or the commission that I'm doing, or, you know, different aspects.
What is your favourite material to work with?
Well, I usually use natural materials and wood or stone, or obviously you have to use glass and steel. But, you know, but I've done quite a bit of work with Ian Schrager, who's the hotelier in New York. And his question to me is always wood or stone, stone or wood. And it doesn't matter what you say, because if you say, Ian, it should be stone on the floor, he goes, well, what about wood? And then you say, okay, wood. And he said, well, what about stone? So it's stone and wood, wood or stone. And this mantra goes, and he's quite serious. You know, I think he thinks if he keeps on, that somewhere along the line, the truth will come out and it'll be stone or wood or stone. It's like, I mean, when I first started, there was only straight-grained Japanese oak. That was what I was going to use on the floor, and white marble. And then as an accent piece, I used some black granite, and then that's about it. And now, of course, you know, with different jobs and different people, you know, some people like grey stone and some people like sand-coloured stone.
But some of your work, Dina, is quite redolent of Richard Serra's monumental modern steel sculptures. And I wonder what you both thought. Do you see jewellery as small sculptures? Because that's how jewellery is described a lot now.
I mean, it can be. The thing about a sculpture is sort of, it removes context most of the time, but not necessarily like in Richard Serra or Pomodoro or any of the great sculptors. So I think it needs to take the context in place, and then everything is a sculpture or art or beauty. But now there's a trend that everybody's an artist and everything is art. And but there's a practicality to being an architect, and I think that's the power I find for me, is that you have to look at technical aspects, context, and not just a beautiful form or something that's outside of that. So for me, yes, I look at sculptors or the piece. If I sit, it needs to, how it sits, how you can look at it outside. And that's why sometimes when we shoot as if we're inside of it or around it, and then it's no longer like a body piece, but it's something else. Can be.
Do you think it's sculpture, John?
I think it's everything. I mean, it's certainly art. It's certainly sculpture. You know, sadly he died, but we did quite a lot of work over the years for Sheikh Saud from Qatar, and he sent me on his list his Christmas card, which I thought was a head of a pharaoh. So I said to him, "Oh, beautiful! That's not a." That's a Khmer 6th century sculpture, and it's, by the way, it's small. I thought it was huge, and we were in his office in South Audley Street, and he said, he said that's not important, and he said, you know, this is, and he had a glass desk to the side, and I went over and not thinking, and I picked this thing up, and he said, yeah, no, that is special. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, Qatar. And I said, oh, Qatar. And he said, yes, Howard Qatar. Howard
Carter. It came from Tutankhamun's tomb.
Yes, he'd bought Howard Carter's collection.
Wow.
And it was just on the table, and it still had, old-fashioned white tags.
Oh my
and they were there, and it was just all on the desk. And I picked up the what's that insect? Anyway,
The scarab.
and with the wings which fold back, and then there was a reservoir for the makeup. And I said, "Oh, the girls must have been very fun." And he said, "No, only men wore makeup." So I was holding the.
That's amazing. How many pieces?
On the desk. I mean, I was too nervous. Really, there must have been a dozen. But the only thing that I have a strong memory of and actually physically picked up was and I of course put it down when he said.
Yes. Because Howard Carter allegedly did smuggle quite a lot out that he wasn't meant to.
Yes. Well, I think all that stuff, I mean, any of those.
And beautiful. And Cartier, of course, took quite a lot of artefacts that they could find through antique dealers and made them into Art Deco jewels and used the old faience pieces from Egypt. Which are beautiful.
Did you know, because he in the same room he had these, old-fashioned wood
the drawers.
And it was just full of necklaces. But they were, 6,000 years old, some of them.
God.
So, I mean, I think, jewellery survives buildings.
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, it's older. I mean, the oldest piece of jewellery must be older than any existing building.
Well, there is a bead in the British Museum which is supposed to be about 100,000 years old. Right. And they think it's a bead because it does show that it's been drilled, and it could only have been drilled to mean it was being used for something. Right. So it's obviously not the full necklace, but it is a shell bead that has been used as jewellery. So I guess it does survive, doesn't it? But then we've still got the pyramids.
Yeah, but they're quite young compared to some of the... I mean, I guess. Yes. Mm.
But that's something you like about architecture, is its permanence.
Yes.
But it's definitely sculpture to you then, Dina.
I don't think of it as sculpture.
You don't?
No. I mean, I just think, you have to design for this. This is the idea, or if you have a context, or you're starting a context, and then I'm designing for the neck. What does it mean here? How does it sit? And how to make it beautiful is a consideration, like in a sculpture. But then technically, what does it do? How it sits, the mechanism, how it feels. I mean, some architects want their buildings more like sculptures, but I think good architecture has to combine beauty and like some pragmatic aspects. They say an architect is a functional artist.
Definitely. and a functioning one. Not every day.
So, but in the old times, and I think they were more, and now I always call, like the way I work, tools of empowerment, because in the old days, if you look at ancient jewelry in pharaohs or other civilizations, and then armor and things like that, these are jewelry, and they are not looked at, like we look at jewelry now. It's more functional. And in the 20s, like the gold filter, these kind of notions of a precious, that's why I wanted to call it at the beginning precious objects, because to me jewelry has a specific understanding.
Well, I think originally it was really all with a talismanic purpose. It was really a sort of spiritual purpose, because people were frightened of the world, or they didn't know, or they had something just as a sort of feeling of protection. So there's that sort of spiritual idea behind it, which could be from some of your buildings. They're very serene. There's a sort of spiritual essence there, calm.
Definitely.
Yes, I've always sort of been slightly shy of describing the secular buildings as sort of spiritual. I mean, obviously the churches, that's what you're searching for, is some spiritual atmosphere.
But even in your dwelling, in your home.
Yes, but when you're designing a church, it's a very specific purpose, and you're trying to help those people get closer to God and making it the whole thing easier. And there's no guarantees when you finish that it will be spiritual, the place, but you try, and you've only got the same materials and form and light.
Like in the chapel, which is very powerful.
Yeah, but I mean, you only got those things to make. It's the same thing. Same vocabulary you've got for a house as a church, but you've got to make it spiritual.
But use it differently.
Yeah, but it's interesting, when the monks first came to me, they wrote and they said, "Oh, we saw the Calvin Klein store. Can you do us a church?"
That's such a weird commission, isn't it? To be inspired by Calvin Klein.
Well, I
by
thought
the monks.
I thought they'd gone there. but because English is not very accurate as a language, so they'd actually seen the photograph, and but what they'd seen was proportion and scale and light, and actually they'd seen 2 tables, which of course the first altar was a kitchen table, so it's not too much of a stretch.
But when you described earlier that you tried to make a piece, or you talked about it with somebody and you thought it didn't work and it was too simple. I mean, Anthony Gormley years ago made a necklace, and it was literally just steel blocks. Couldn't have been more simple. Yeah. And he did say, it'll be more beautiful when it rusts. And I thought, well, actually it's not going to work with a white shirt. But it couldn't have been more simple, and it was very beautiful. So what would you make if you made a piece? I'm not going to hold you to it, so it's okay.
No, I have no idea, but I think it wouldn't be it wouldn't be so rigid, I don't think. I think it would be something.
What's the piece you made?
It was I can't really remember because it was so redolent of there's an Italian designer actually a bit like Kuromata called A.G. Franzoni, and he did the most beautiful. He was from Milan, and he did a lot of graphic work, posters and things as well as architecture. But he did some jewellery which was very.
I know who it is.
I think and so it was sort of similar to that, just sort of a shape in gold with thin lines of gold on
sort
the
of
chest.
more fluid feeling to it.
No, this was very geometric.
Okay.
I think I would do something much more fluid now. Maybe I better get on with it and do some jewellery.
I did try and commission you. Do you remember years ago? I did an exhibition at Masterpiece London.
Right. Oh yes.
And I got Karl Lagerfeld to make something, and I mean it was an amazing exhibition. But I think you were too busy. I'm going to have to think of another. That was his way out. He was too busy. But I'll have to do another exhibition.
No, I should, because it's a challenge. Yeah, there's a challenge left, definitely.
And I think you said even something as modest as a fork can become a vehicle for much broader ideas about how we live and what we value.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's just things that you come into contact with, on a daily basis. I think they're so important. I had this thing where if something's already designed that you can't really beat, then you shouldn't. But I've changed my mind. So.
And you've tackled a fork.
Tackled a fork and a chair, which is even more.
What do you think the ideas of jewellery provoke, do you think, when we see someone wearing jewellery? And what are the wider ideas, do you think, it becomes a vehicle for something else?
I think mostly, jewelry is identified either with wealth or stature, and then it's things that are intimate, like like a talisman, like you said, or something from your grandparents or your parents, or this connection, or for your wedding. But I like to I look at jewelry. I look more at ceremonial jewelry for tribes or for war, even though I'm anti-war. But things that help us as tools. Like I feel now more and more we need things attached to us that give us this internal feeling or edge or power that we need. And I think jewelry can do that easily. You put something, it shifts something in you, it puts you in a state of mind. And I love these notions and to relate them to jewelry more and more. And I think, to me, that's the future of jewelry more than just ornament. Ornament is beautiful and doing that for wealth or love or all of that. But how you use them as daily tools or as, I don't want to say weapons, but as like your armor. And, what you need today or always. But clothes and jewelry can be the same thing as architecture, part of your personality. I think that's what it needs to strip to the minimum, back to what it needs to be, and then it's more...
But the work that I do, obviously you always have a client, and then the architecture is a product of the relationship with the client. But you're designing spaces to occupy. They're not trophies, or
They are.
Well, they might be.
They will invite people in and say, "Look at John Pawson designed this."
Well, they shouldn't.
And
I'll put it in the contract.
They are making a statement about who they are and what they like by
Even
their
a secular
surrounding.
space is a statement somehow. I mean,
Well,
it
it's not
hasn't.
supposed to. It's supposed to be something where you come as a guest and you feel good,
Yeah.
and you don't understand necessarily why you feel good, but you definitely feel different, and you have an explanation of air, and you go, ooh, this feels nice. Well, we hope.
But they are expressing who they are through your expression of what you've created. And in a way, jewellery is that when they leave the home, when they leave that space, they are saying, this is who I am, because I'm wearing these certain pieces and it's my identity. And I do believe more now when you talk about ancient jewellery, Dina, and how it was sort of an object of power and empowerment. And I think actually now people have less things they can rely on in life, that maybe they use jewellery's got more power again because people need it to feel comforted or secure, or they move around a lot, they can take their jewellery with them. I don't know, I think maybe it's got that importance again.
I think in both ways, maybe. I mean, it's back in fashion, so people want to spend on jewellery because it's a good investment and all that. Even men's jewellery, which wasn't before and now is really much stronger. But I think also because we're looking for that one piece that is part of us and that you feel is part of your identity, or similar, it gives you a feeling like when you're in a space.
I remember when I went to Santa Monica to interview Frank Gehry when he had started this sort of collaboration for Tiffany years ago. And so I went out and I went to his studio. I had 150 architects working there. Unbelievable, with different sort of models behind, some different sizes, some tiny, some huge. I asked him, obviously, why he was doing this, and he said it was very attractive for him at that point in his life, as he was getting older, that instead of working on sort of 10-year projects, he could have a quicker realization in making smaller things like jewellery. Do you feel that when you're working on a chair or something else, that it's actually quite nice on smaller pieces that you can see the end result quicker?
Well, it's very nice to be able to work on something at a small scale, because you can have it there in your hands and you can see the finished thing at a certain point and you can say, okay. Whereas with the building, when it's finished, it's not exactly how it was supposed to be. Do you know what I mean? In the construction and the period, it changes, and you haven't total control. I mean, you can't sort of build it and then say, okay, build that, because it's built. Whereas with a small object, you can.
You have more control.
Yeah, but the irony is that we did some cookpots, and they are Belgian, and they are the best cookpot maker in the world. I mean, the best stainless steel and they're 16 layers for the bottom and all the rest of it. I mean, they took 9 years.
Really?
So the small things have taken me as long as the longest project.
Wow.
As an architect, you get used to 10 years is the outside, but you have at least designed it in the first year, so you know what it is. It's just getting it built.
Refined it.
Well, and all the complexities of getting something built. The hotel in Jaffa in Israel, we started in 2005 and finished in 2018. Because of all the political and religious problems, and it was on a sensitive site. Sorry.
What's the longest project you've done, Dina?
A necklace I was doing for a client. It took almost a year from when we started the idea, and it took a long time to finish because it had like very custom mechanism and hinges, and it's all done by hand. And
you have to have your arms around his neck.
So that took a long time. But usually for custom work, the minimum is 3 months, more like 6 months for a project to be completed from when I start with the idea. So it's much quicker than architecture. But
And you want to build a new kind of retail space now, don't you?
yeah, I struggled when I started to go commercial, which I still am figuring out how to grow.
No, don't go commercial.
I don't want to go commercial, but I want to grow in a way, or be more accessible, and at the same time not lose integrity of what the idea and all that. So I guess it's a challenge. But for me, because I think of space, and I'm fascinated by how we feel space and experience it. When even I started, I had a vision of how these, even with the pinky rings, you have the grid and how you access it, and I wanted to build almost this chaos kind of space that you go into, and how you try the pieces, how you experience, you feel that it's like and you're out. It's like
Wow.
So I still want to build this installation that I feel that it can sit in this, it sits in London for 6 months and then moves somewhere, and where you go view some of the pieces, try them, experience it, and other things. So we'll see if I get to make it. But yeah, I think every project though varies. It's not that I just want to change the whole retail experience in general. I think it depends what you're doing, or what the project is.
Well, I think there's a good thing that the retail experience probably is changing.
It is,
rapidly,
yeah,
isn't
finally.
It? And nobody knows quite what it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's important for people to have something to connect them. People like stories, don't they? And that your installation will connect them to whatever they wear from you and give them a story.
Why would it be temporary? Why would it move?
There can be something permanent, but the idea is, so I was very interested in the idea of a trolley when you pick dessert, or a vending machine and you move it from space to space based on needs, right? So, and why can't luxury be part of that, So, and for me, the kiosk or this cube or whatever it ends up being is something that you feel, or I feel, that there is this piece or this experience that's going to exist now here, and then it moves to and another experience fits in its place or a space.
Yeah. We were on a remote country platform in Japan waiting for the local train last month, and there was this white vending machine with the objects in it. It was quite big, but it looked like something from those science fiction films of going to another planet. It was all white and glowing, and the objects look very special. Made me want to buy immediately, and I don't normally do it, but of course I didn't have.
And what were the objects?
They were just a thing of, soy milk or something.
Yes.
Or Coca-Cola.
I like also the grid and the matrix, like you kind of pick, how when you go with the numbers to pick something. Yeah. And it's sort of, there's something personal about that, but even though you're isolated from it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward. I hope you get it built.
Okay.
We will
Thank you.
tell everybody on If Jewels Could Talk. And John is going to maybe use gold. Gold would be your preferred metal to make a piece of jewellery.
Whatever looks good on the
person.
Body, yeah.
Well, gold looks good.
Yes, no, gold is hard to beat.
Okay. There's our challenge. If Jules Could Talk is going to get hold of some gold. And we will be the first people to show you a John Pawson piece of jewellery. Maybe.
I look forward to seeing it.
Oh gosh.
But thank you so much, both of you, for joining me and for that fascinating conversation. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was lovely.
John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. For this and other episodes of If Jewels Could Talk, please go to our website, carolwoolton.com/podcasts. Do share it any way you can, and we love a comment and a rating. For more information on our sponsors, it's fooleygemstones.com. And we are up for an award at the British Podcasts Awards, and there's a link on the website. We would love your support and a vote. Thank you. Now join me again in 2 weeks for the next Jewelled Nugget, when I'll be talking about spirit animals with a shaman and with a jewellery designer. And I'm going to find out what my spirit animal is. Do you know what yours is? Join us then, and thank you for listening. Goodbye. If Jewels Could Talk with Carol Woolton is produced by Natasha Cowan, music and editing by Tim Thornton, graphics by Scott Bentley, illustration by Jordi Labanda, and you can find me on Instagram @Carol Woolton.